Hey folks, I don't know if anybody out there is listening yet, but I am here in a wood, a really quite beautiful wood, well and truly, as best I can be, socially distant. Where I've chosen to sit, the sun is directly behind me, so I'm going to do my best to remember to keep the sun behind my big fat head and not blind you or wash us out too much. But as I said in the description, I think I'm going to read some narrative poems here, just sort of on a whim. And the first is by Edgar Allan Poe, and it's Annabel Lee, which some folks requested. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived who you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee. With a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted, her and me. And this was the reason that long ago in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my Annabel Lee. So that her highborn kinsman came and bore her away from me to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. That's Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. That was, if I'm remembering my Poe trivia correctly, the very last poem he ever wrote. So perhaps he went and lay down in that sepulchre. He didn't, but it's a nice thought. Up next is one of my favorite narrative poems, although it is a lie in its entirety. It created a legend, and that is what a narrative poem should do. Either talk about a legend or create one. And this is by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Paul Revere's Ride. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April in 75. Hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. One if by land, and two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and to arm. Then he said good night, and with muffled oar silently rowed to the Charlestown shore, just as the moon rose over the bay, where swinging wide at her moorings lay the Somerset British man-of-war. A phantom ship with each mast and spar across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile, his friend, through alley and street, wanders and watches with eager ears, till in the silence around him he hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms, and the tramp of feet, and the measured tread of the grenadiers marching down to their boats on the shore. Then he climbed the tower of the old North Church by the wooden stairs with stealthy tread to the belfry chamber overhead, and startled the pigeons from their perch on the sombre rafters that round him made masses and moving shapes of shade by the trembling ladder steep and tall to the highest window in the wall, where he paused to listen and look down a moment on the roofs of the town and the moonlight flowing over all. Beneath, In the churchyard lay the dead, in their night encampment on the hill, wrapped in silence so deep and still that he could hear, like a sentinel's tread, the watchful night wind as it went creeping along from tent to tent, and seeming to whisper, "All is well." A moment only he feels the spell of the place and the hour and the secret dread of the lonely belfry and the dead. For suddenly all his thoughts are bent on a shadowy something far away where the river widens to meet the bay, a line of black that bends and floats on the rising tide like a bridge of boats. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now gazed at the landscape far and near, then impetuous stamped the earth and turned and tightened his saddle girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the old North Church, as it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and somber and still. And lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer and then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes, till full on his sight a second lamp in the belfry burns. A hurry of hoofs in the village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles in passing a spark struck out by a steed flying fearless and fleet. That was all, and yet through the gloom and the light, the fate of a nation was riding that night, and the spark struck out by that steed in his flight kindled the land into flame with its heat. He has left the village and mounted the steep, and beneath him, tranquil and broad and deep, is the mystic meeting the ocean tides, and under the alders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge, is heard the tramp of his steed as he rides. It was 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge into Medford town. He heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt the damp of the river fog that rises after the sun goes down. It was 1 by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. He saw the gilded weathercock swim in the moonlight as he passed, and the meeting-house windows, blank and bare, gazed at him with a spectral glare, as if they already stood aghast at the bloody work they would look upon. It was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town. He heard the bleating of the flock and the twitter of birds among the trees, and felt the breath in the morning breeze blowing over the meadows brown. And 1 was safe and asleep in his bed, who at the bridge would be first to fall, who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball. You know the rest. In books you have read how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear. A voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore, for borne on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, is the hour, in the hour of darkness and peril and need. The people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. This is one of my favorites. I like this. It's a great Longfellow, for starters. A great work in a body of great work, but also somewhat appropriate for the recent events, I think. The British are coming, my folks and friends, and it's our job to stay brave and join together, never stopping, but to fire and load. Let's do another one. There's a wonderful poem by a poet named Robert Service, who was sort of a frontier poet, writing 120, 140 years ago or so. And he wrote some wonderful ones. We're going to read 2 today, I think, but the first is my favorite of his. It's weird and it's creepy and it's a ghost story, and it's The Cremation of Sam McGee. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Lebarge I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd sooner live in hell. On a Christmas day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold! Through the parka's fold it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we'd close, then the lashes froze till sometimes we couldn't see. It wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, and the dogs were fed and the stars o'erhead were dancing heel to toe, he turned to me and, "Cap," says he, "I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking that you won't refuse my last request." Well, he seemed so low that I couldn't say no. Then he says with a sort of a moan, "It's the cursed cold, and it's got right hold till I'm chilled clean through to the bone. It tain't being dead, it's my awful dread of the icy grave that pains. So I want you to swear that foul or fair, you'll cremate my last remains." A pal's last need is a thing to heed, so I swore I would not fail. And we started on at the streak of dawn, but God, he looked ghastly pale. He crouched on the sleigh, and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee, and before nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death as I hurried horror-driven, with a corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of a promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, "You may tax your brawn brains, but you promised true, and it's up to you to cremate those last remains." Now, a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. In the days to come, though my lips were numb, in my heart how I cursed that load. In the long, long night by the lone firelight, when the huskies round in a ring howled out their woes to the homeless snows, oh God, how I loathed that thing. And every day that quiet clay seemed to heavy and heavier grow. And on I went, though the dogs were spent and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad, and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in. And I'd often sing to the hateful thing, and it hearkened with a grin. Till I came to the marge of Lake Lebarge, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, but I saw in a trice it was called the Alice May. And I looked at it, and I thought a bit, and I looked at my frozen chum. "Then here," said I, with a sudden cry, "is my crematorium." Some planks I tore from the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found that was lying around, and I heaped the fuel higher. The flames just soared and the furnace roared, such a blaze you seldom see, and I burrowed a hole in the glowing coal, and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Then I made a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so. And the heavens scowled, and the huskies howled, and the wind began to blow. It was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I don't know why. And the greasy smoke in an inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I do not know how long in the snow I wrestled with grisly fear, but the stars came out, and they danced about ere again I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I bravely said, "I'll just take a peep inside. I guess he's cooked," and it's time I looked. Then the door I opened wide. And there sat Sam, looking cool and calm in the heart of the furnace roar. And he wore a smile, you could see a mile, and he said, "Please close that door. It's fine in here, but I greatly fear you'll let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plum Tree down in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warm." There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Lebarge. I cremated Sam McGee. I love that one. It's creepy and weird and just perfect for old Americana, I think. Oh, I forgot and let the sun get past me. All right, let's see what we got next. Ooh. No, I don't think so. You know what? How about I feed my ego a little and I do one of mine. You guys like that? I mean, you can't stop me at this point. This one's called As I Walk, and it's by me. As I walk, I stop atop the remains of cliffs. A story filled with broken, jagged edges and shattered walls give mute testimony to the sundering. A sudden change and crash of wave draws my attention down. At the foot of the gray and red stone crumble, a causeway rises. I walk out onto the land bridge, revealing itself from the tide. Not gingerly enough on the slick granite mortared with bird shit and barnacles, I, with wet heels on my boots, step onto an island beach. Mussels and more rocks that the beating surf had not yet crushed rock into sand. Pressing on, I see what seems to be a savage garden in violet. Primordial forest teeming with life, mostly stranded deer and transient birds. Near the west side of the island, the side that faces the deep Atlantic instead of the nearby shore, not on the beach, but close, I find a moss forest. The green, almost as deep as the moss itself, it absorbs my boots into itself, more active than a sponge and gentle as a lover. It grows on the birches and pines and cedars, lichen-like, but fuzzy and soft. Nothing moves there except myself, and my intrusion is accepted, if not welcome. This island exploration consumes hours before I move to continue my odyssey along the beach on the Bay of Fundy. Back across the causeway, now flooded, with 3 soaked boots and a twisted ankle, courtesy of a rolling ball of stone, my foot found hiding beneath the rising surf. I regain the mainland shore. Ahead I see a promontory, tall and prideful, somewhat humbled by its mass. I climb. My fingertips dig into the chalky limestone and my toes scrabble for purchase. On the other side of the outcrop I see a child and its mother. In a way, a river meeting the sea looks like a fight, but it is a joining. Swirling currents, wavelets crashing against each other turbulently. Only a few feet away upriver or in the bay, everything is deceptively calm. All the agitation of the currents and the riptides hide under the surface until they crash into each other and rise up to the surface where I can see them. I follow this little river along its path, looking for its source, and instead finding ages, rivulets, changes along its erratic, erotic course. Actions don't affect the greater stream. It seems like a rock placed correctly would water the land, but the stream has its course and won't easily change for a rock. A habit, however, a rock every day, can make it jump the riverbank, at least until the rock is worn to sand, which it will, sometime. The river might still be there. The water understands. The river disappears into an impenetrable forest, so I have to stop or change course or fight through the undergrowth. I stop and sit in this contented estuary, and later kept walking. That's one of mine. Doesn't really belong in the company of the ones that I've been reading here, but what are you going to do? Let's see here. Here's one that also kind of doesn't fit, mostly because it's not typically classified as a narrative poem, but I love it, and so I'm going to subject you to it here as I do one more, or maybe 2 more. This is Ulysses by Alfred Tennyson. It little profits that an idle king by this still hearth among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I meet and dole unequal laws unto a savage race that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me. I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. All times I have enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that loved me and alone on shore, and when through scudding drifts the rainy Hyades vexed the dim sea, I am become a name. For always roaming with a hungry heart, much have I seen and known, cities of men, in manners, climates, councils, government, myself not least, but honored of them all, and drunk delight of battle with my peers, far on the ringing plains of windy Troy. I am a part of all I have met, yet all experience is an arch, where through gleams that untraveled world, whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use, as though to breathe were life. Life piled on life were all too little, and of one to me little remains, but every hour is saved from that eternal silence, something more, a bringer of new things, and vile it were for some 3 suns to store and hoard myself in this gray spirit, yearning in desire to follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bound of human thought. This is my son, mine own Telemachus, to whom I leave the scepter in the isle, well loved of me, discerning to fulfill this labor by slow prudence to make mild a rugged people, and through soft degrees subdue them to the useful and the good. Most blameless is he, centered to the sphere of common duties, decent not to fail in offices of tenderness, and pay meet adoration to my household gods when I am gone. He works his work, I mine. There lies the port. The vessel puffs her sail. There gloom the dark, broad seas. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine, and opposed free hearts, free foreheads. You and I are old. Old age hath yet his honor and his toil. Death closes all, but something ere the end. Some work of noble note may yet be done, not unbecoming men that strove with gods. The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes. The slow moon climbs. The deep moans round with many voices. Come, my friends. 'Tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off, and sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows, for my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset, in the baths of all the western stars, until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. I love that one. Also seems appropriate, given current events. So we're going to do one more. I notice most folks have dropped off, but thanks for you folks who are still with me. This one is one that you may have all heard and been familiar with, but you may not know it was originally a poem by Shel Silverstein. Someone asked for Dr. Seuss. Shel Silverstein is as close as I'm going to get today. And it was made popular by a fellow you may have heard of named Johnny Cash. And this is a poem called A Boy Named Sue. Well, my daddy left home when I was 3, and he didn't leave much to ma and me, just this old guitar and a bottle of booze. Now, I don't blame him because he run and hid, but the meanest thing that he ever did was before he left, he went and named me Sue. Well, he must have thought it was quite a joke, and it got lots of laughs from a lot of folks. It seems I had to fight my whole life through. Some gal would gigger and I'd get red, and some guy would laugh and I'd bust his head, and I tell you, life ain't easy for a boy named Sue. Well, I grew up quick and I grew up mean. My fist got hard and my wits got keen, roamed from town to hide my shame. But I made me a vow to the moon and the stars, I'd search the honky-tonks and bars and kill that man that gave me that awful name. But it was Gatlinburg in mid-July, and I just had hit town and my throat was dry. I thought I'd stop and have myself a brew. At an old saloon in a street of mud, and at a table dealing studs, sat the dirty, mangy dog that named me Sue. Well, I knew that snake was my own sweet dad, and from a worn-out picture that my mother had, and I knew the scar in his cheek and his evil eye. He was bent and big and gray and old, and I looked at him and my blood ran cold, and I said, "My name is Sue. How do you do? Now, you're gonna die." Yeah, that's what I told him. Well, I hit him right between the eyes and he went down, but to my surprise, he came up with a knife and cut off a piece of my ear. But I busted a chair right across his teeth and we crashed through the wall and into the street, kicking and a-gouging in the mud and the blood and the beer. I tell you, I fought tougher men, but I really can't remember when. He kicked like a mule and he bit like a crocodile. I heard him laughing and then I heard him cussing. He went for his gun and I pulled mine first. He stood there looking at me and I saw him smile. And he said, "Son, this world is rough, and if a man's gonna make it, he's gotta be tough, and I knew I wouldn't be there to help you along. So I gave you that name, and I said goodbye. I knew you'd have to get tough or die, and it's that name that helped to make you strong." "Yeah," he said, "now, you've just fought one hell of a fight, and I know you hate me, and you've got the right to kill me now, and I wouldn't blame you if you do. But you ought to thank me before I die for the gravel in your guts and the spit in your eye, 'cause I'm the guy who named you Sue." Yeah, what could I do? What could I do? I got all choked up and I threw down my gun, called him Pa and he called me a son, and I came away with a different point of view. And I think about him every now and then, every time I tried, every time I win. And if I ever have a son, I think I'm gonna name him Bill or George or anything but Sue. And that's the last one I think we're going to do today. Thanks for you folks who were watching. Hope you enjoyed those. I'll be back again to read some more at some point. Hope you're all social distancing well. Hope you're taking advantage of good weather where you can. And, take care of each other. Love each other. I certainly love you. Wash your hands. And we'll see you again soon.